Hi, my name is Jack Haley, and welcome to my senior project. It's the science of when to send it, building a computational model of base wingsuit aerodynamics in MATLAB. Also, I was lucky to be advised this quarter by Dr. Eric Salate, so special thanks to him for giving great guidance and also allowing a unusual topic for a research project, but also something that I am super passionate about. So without further ado, what is base wingsuit jumping? Well, it comes from skydiving. Okay, it comes from skydiving. First, you have a person jumping off something with a parachute attached to their back. So, next, you have the wingsuit, which is also known as a squirrel suit, but because they literally inspired, flying squirrels did, their creation. And it's basically this big suit that increases a person's aerodynamics and actually lets them fly a little bit better through the air. So BASE is just an acronym that stands for a building, an antenna, a span like a bridge, or the earth, which in this case would be like a cliff. And it's a dangerous sport. It is an extreme sport, to say the least. Often ranked one of the most dangerous sports in the world, if not the most dangerous. And so people make mistakes. When they're playing games, when you're doing a sport, mistakes happen. We're all human. But in this sport, if you make a mistake, it could cost you your life. So, not to be too dramatic, but here's a quick example of a base wingsuit jump. You've got the parachute here on the back. A wingsuit, that's a rather small wingsuit, just saying. And the jumper is jumping off a cliff and just kind of starting his jump there to fly safely out. So one more little bit about the risk and the danger involved. This was kind of what set me off on the path of looking at this research-wise. The most dangerous part is when people are jumping off cliffs with wingsuits on. And I thought, hey, we should model this. There should be, when people are putting their lives on the line like this, there should be like a Google Maps for people jumping off a cliff saying, hey, this is the safest route to go. Watch out for this thing. Hang a right here. Rather than the state of the art today, which is basically just eyeball it and go for it. So that was a big thing for me. And that's what led to this research question of, can we make a strong model of this so that we can answer questions about a jump and potentially inform people and increase their safety, or just give them better information than they might not have had. So a little bit of background here. Starting with a free body diagram, we got the force of gravity coming down, force of drag, and lift. This is the angle of attack alpha, and really the only difference between drag and lift is the coefficient here, coefficient of lift versus the coefficient of drag. They both go with velocity squared, and so we can solve for the equations of motion in 2 dimensions, and then put that into MATLAB and use ODE 45 to solve over a span of time. A little more background here. So the angle of attack, it's not just constant during a jump. It's literally up to the jumper. So they could just decide to go for a dive. They could decide to come up a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind. It's varying. Also, the presented surface area, whether there's a lot of surface area slowing someone down, or they're doing a more steep dive, so they're just cutting right through, that's changing. And then one final thing is that modern wingsuits they're inflated. They're inflated during the jump using these little vents. And what happens is when someone jumps off, it's like a sail on a sailboat catching wind, and it like puffs the suit up and gives it better aerodynamics during the jump. So another thing to keep in mind. So on to the methods. The approach we took was basically just start with the model and program the all the physics in, and then also look at kind of the changing angles of attack and surface area and those things, and then compare. I was lucky enough to get 50 real base jump GPS like recordings, not some simulation, but literally something that different jumpers had worn a tracker and jumped off of cliffs with a wingsuit on. So this is extremely valuable data, even though it's a small data set. So we compared to that data. Okay, so this is just those first premises. We coded in the forces in the X and Y dimension. And then also you see gravity, force of gravity comes up here in the acceleration. So here's kind of those changing elements. The angle of attack, you know, in the first couple seconds, person goes from literally standing straight up to kind of like flat, and then they keep falling because they're falling through the air. So they keep falling until they can kind of like shallow that fall back out, bring it back up. And at that time, you can kind of see the suit starts to inflate a little bit, and then the person starts to strike their angle of attack that they're going to strike for more of the jump. But it was just really hard to try to model anything past those first couple seconds because it's literally up to the jumper. So what we did was we said, hey, I watched all these videos and said, this is what the function looks like for the first 5 seconds. And then after that, we're just going to have a shallow, 15-degree angle of attack example, and then incrementing all the way through, and we'll see how those look compared to the data. So, and then of course the surface area is changing as a function of alpha in those two dimensions. So as the angle of attack increases, the surface area presented in Y is less, but in X is greater. So just something to keep in mind. Onto the data. Again, we were lucky to get this data. People, I know it's what they love to do, but they did risk their life to get this data. And it came in CSV file format. We did basically only care about the altitude here in meters above sea level, and then also the velocity magnitude. So we took that and then basically put it in 2 dimensions. So here you have the data in the Y dimension, falling, just the altitude. And when we started out, all the jumps were from different altitudes. So I had to go through and normalize to get everything to start at the same level. But then after that, you see it looks pretty normal. These are all people who are different heights, different weights, they have different wingspans. You know, the surface area is different for each of them. Their coefficients of drags are different. The wingsuits they're wearing are different. So it was nice to see such, kind of a pretty normal data set here. And then this is the theory. This is the model. Those are the different angles of attack I was telling you about. So this is where the two meet. And okay, so what do we see? Well, looks pretty good, right? At the angle of attack of 15 degrees up here, it's a little bit shallower than it looks like most people strike, and then onto 30 to 45 to 60, 75, and then 85 degrees, we cover a wide swath of the data. This is the mean line of the data, this blue line, and it's interesting because Dr. Salate and I didn't think that people would strike such a steep angle of attack on a jump, but that's what they do. So, yep, we just noticed that it was between 60 and 75 degrees, and but if you look up here, the first couple of seconds, the model disagrees with the, here's actually a zoomed in version of that. So you see that there's a lot of data that's kind of just outlying over the first 10 to 15 seconds of the model. That's an important, that's actually a significant chunk of time because this time span was simulated, or my model only runs for 90 seconds. So to disagree for 10 of those is significant. Moving on to the distance. So it looks like there's less data here, but looks like there's less tracks, but it's the same amount, I promise. It's just this scale is different. So they're more spread out. So again, we have the theory overlaid here. So this is where the two meet. Again, looks pretty good. A lot, especially later, is covered. The mean, surprisingly, is between 75 and 85 degrees angle of attack instead of 60 to 75. So that's an interesting takeaway. But again, looking at these first couple seconds, we see maybe some problems for the model. And here's a zoomed in picture. This is the theory down here. All this red down here, this is the real data and the blue mean line. So we basically missed the first 12 seconds of the jump. But ultimately, pretty good. The percent that we could account for in the Y dimension, like vertically, was 89%, and in the distance dimension, was 85%. So ultimately, this leads to some sources of error, and basically, just not looking at the pressurization, the function for changing alpha might have been wrong. We didn't account for the wind, and not looking at angles past 90 degrees or lower than 15 degrees also could have been part of it. But ultimately, yes, we can build a strong computational model of base wingsuit flight in MATLAB. Even though it wasn't above 90%, we're right there. And this research kind of unifies little things that have been done in the base wingsuit aerodynamic community over the past 20 years. And the hope is that in the future, this can lead to just safety, just more safety and more information for those jumpers. So my acknowledgements here. Thank you to everyone who was a part of this research. It was awesome and just super fun to be a part of. And my references, and yes, I will be online ready to answer questions. And just thank you for everything this quarter, and I hope you're all well. It's been a crazy time, so thank you.